Pokemon Infinite Fusion, you can fuse together any two Pokemon, but what if every encounter in the game was completely randomized in a hardcore Nuzlocke, where any Pokemon that faints is boxed forever, and you only get to catch the first Pokemon you find in any area? Well, we'd have to hope our starters are anything to write home about. Our first option is Elia. Oh boy, don't tell me anything weird about this one. Next up is Meowki, which could be pretty awesome with Technician and fighting moves. And finally, Pikatar, which looks like Pupitar's been to a child's birthday party. I end up picking Elia, which means, gentlemen, I want to see all hands above the table. She's not here to be stared at, she's here to fight other creatures with her life at stake, since this is a Nuzlocke. Girl really can't catch a break. I head to Route 1 to start my journey and find my first wild encounter. Hopefully nothing you guys will find seductive. Ah, crap. My encounter's a Milner, which at least seems pretty strong to have this early in the game. Now in the game, you can defuse your Pokemon, and I won't be allowing any mixing of encounters, but I will allow myself to fuse the Pokemon into its other form. I then head to Route 2, where my encounter is a Digdor. Ooh, I seem to have caught someone during their toilet break. I press on to Viridian Forest, where I run into what seems like a super weak Pokemon, Magikarp and Slackoth fused together, but realizing that these two could potentially evolve into a slacking Gyarados fusion with Intimidate is scary. With a team of 4 assembled, I decide to take on the first gym leader, Brock, but we only get to bring the same amount of Pokemon, too. The way that randomized gyms work in Infinite Fusion is the gym leaders still have a type theme, but the type that they get is completely randomized, in this case giving Brock dragon types. And low-level dragon types are pretty weak, meaning we can easily handle his Centini. However, his Dragonx is a much bigger threat, immediately flinching us with Twister and getting us down into the red with a critical hit before we can use Stomp. It does do over half, but since we won't outspeed because of the paralysis, I'm forced to swap out into Elia, who, because we reversed her fusion, is no longer a fairy type and can be hit by the dragon move Twister. It's really not that big a threat, however, and a couple of disarming voices handles the Dragonx, getting us our first gym badge from Brock. After the gym fight, I start heading through Mount Moon, where my first encounter is a Charita. Looks like somebody drew on your face. Has anybody seen Jigglypuff? Luckily, we can evolve this thing at level 16 right away into Charleaf, and it looks pretty good. However, because Charmander evolves at 16 too, it evolves again at the next level, and I wish I could go back in time. We then run into Team Rocket trying to fuse 3 Pokemon together, which seems absolutely crazy. Imagine doing something like fusing Cerulege, Machamp, and Magearna together. Actually, maybe that would be a mistake. What's definitely not a mistake, though, is training our Magikarp and getting it to level 18, where Slackoth evolves into Vigoroth. However, we don't have to stop there, since the level cap is at 22, we can also evolve Magikarp into Gyarados to create this monstrosity. Having such a bonkers, overpowered Pokemon on the team very much over-prepares us for the second gym fight with Misty, who ironically has bug types. Being possibly the weakest type in the game, Charleaf has no trouble taking out her Oddco, sending in her final Pokemon, Yonmander, which actually poses a threat with Dragon Rage. Yonmander outspeeds us and can dish out 40 HP of damage every turn, so I'm forced to swap into Gyarados, who unfortunately doesn't have over 80 HP, so we can't take a second hit. However, it being a fully evolved Gyarados, we're just faster and can finish it off with a Thrash, granting us the gym badge. Before we can reach our next destination in Vermilion City, we pass through Route 5, where I find a Raltic, which, despite being the attaching feeling Pokemon, I don't want you attaching any feelings to. We can then also evolve Digdor into Digdoom, but it ends up looking a lot better once we also evolve it into Dugtrio. Which leads us to the main event of Vermilion City, taking on Lieutenant Surge, who himself has taken on ghost types, perhaps haunted by his war-torn past. Luckily, my team is full of strong normal types, and I can bring my Milner and Gyarados, understanding that they won't be able to use their normal stab against the ghost types either. Once I've dealt with Hauntini, Lieutenant Surge reveals his Clefgrigus, a ghost fairy type. On top of that, it's got Nightshade, and being just one hit away from being taken out, we have to swap out Dugdoom. I send in Gyarados, who manages to dodge an Ominous Wind, but barely does any damage with Bite the next turn, also acquiring the Mummy ability. The next turn, Clefgrigus shows me Will-O-Wisp, something I really didn't want to see, since we were barely doing any damage before anyway. Now our damage output is severely hampered. I'm not sure at all why Surge wants to swap out after this, though, allowing us to take out his Smeartly, but it gets him a bit of burn damage and barely improves my position. Aside from the burn damage, damage, the Clefagrigus doesn't actually have a way to damage normal types, so I'm free to swap out into Milner. Realizing Milner doesn't have a single move I can hit this thing with, I'm forced to swap out into Rudolph, who barely does any damage at all with a Night Slash, only getting mummified in the process before Clefagrigus promptly entombs me thereafter. And if things weren't bad enough, Clefagrigus gets an Omni boost off the ominous wind that killed me. What's already a losing battle is rapidly taking a turn for the worse. Between the burn and the defense boost, our bites are barely scratching this thing. And while Clefagrigus has no way to directly damage us, the burn is taking 1/8 of our health every single turn, and we certainly aren't doing that much damage back. With health depleting fast, we quickly go down into the red and are forced to swap out into Milner. She does have Dragon Rage to easily deal with ghost types, but it doesn't help when you're facing a fairy type. We're perfectly countered by this thing's typing, and now we're also on an 8-turn clock due to burn. The only move I can hit this thing with is Thunder Wave, which in hindsight I think is a huge mistake. The only way we win this fight is if it runs out of PP, and Paralysis is gonna make that take longer. How do we even effectively PP stall with a burn? Well, we've got Milk Drink to recover back half of our health. The only issue being, Milk Drink only has 10 PP, meaning we definitely don't have unlimited time to execute this strategy. Once Clefagrigus runs out of Nightshade, it shows me Hex, which is perfect since Hex only has 10 PP. I then also have a sudden realization, wait a second, I've got Scrappy. Body Slam can actually hit Clefagrigus, but the dream is quickly crushed since I immediately receive Mummy, making me no longer able to hit ghost types with normal type moves. Once Clef is out of Hexes, we've got to deal with Will-O-Wisp, which has 15 PP, a little bit more, and we're starting to run out of Milk Drinks. And with no Thunder Wave or Body Slam PP left, I gotta go for Dragon Rage. Then after the burn, with only 11 health remaining, I use my final Milk Drink to get back to 54 HP. With nothing but Dragon Rage left, my fate rests in the hands of the RNG gods. With about a 5-turn margin, I just barely grabbed the victory from the depths of defeat, just on the edge of having to reset the entire run. That was close.
Have you ever seen what a Diglett looks like under the ground?
Yeah, I used to have one. Used to? Meaning that we're in desperate need of finding some new Pokemon, the first of which being a Ryotom on Route 9. And while fighting Ghost is a really cool combo, refusing it not only makes it look better, but also makes it a Steel Electric type with Levitate. I then start blindly making my way through Rock Tunnel, where I find a Magnadile. Further on the way towards Celadon, I reach Route 8, where my capture is a Litley. On the way, I also managed to evolve some of my Pokemon, the first of which being Ryotom, and that is what I'm talking about. Next, we can evolve both of our Raltsline fusions into Gardetic and Gardevoir. And since I've got access to Evolution Stones in Celadon, I could theoretically make the most cursed fusion ever between Gardevoir and Vaporeon.
No, God! No, God, please, no! 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 No!
This is my final warning. Finally, before Erica, we can evolve Charlie into Charganium, a big improvement. Now, Erica's been randomized into having psychic types, and on top of that, she's right before the game's difficulty curve starts to spike up. This means her team was incredibly underwhelming, her most dangerous Pokemon probably being a Mewtwo. With our Pokemon starting to reach their final forms around this level, acquiring the 4th gym badge was a piece of cake. And with the updated level cap, we can actually reach some of our final forms. The first of which being Gyaraking, and oh my goodness, look at that attack stat. Next, we've got Charganium evolving into Charganium, but this time it looks even better. I then pick up the Pokeflute to wake up the Snorlax resting on Route 16, which is randomized into a Chartile. I already have a Charizard Grass Starter fusion, but you won't see me complaining about this one. We then evolve Gardetic into Gardevoir, and while this fusion sprite looks awesome, the same artist has made an absolutely stunning sprite, but you still don't get to attach any feelings. With our team very upgraded, it's time to take on the 5th gym leader, Koga, the ground type enthusiast. Which unfortunately for him means he has a terrible matchup against my Verdant Sauropod. Taking out his first 2 Pokemon with Petal Dance does mean we're locked in against Charking, but since he just uses a Dragon Rage to leave me at 69 HP, nice. Once we get confused, we can easily swap out the turn after into Gyaraking, who at this point has more than enough health to deal with Dragon Rage and can take out the Charking with a quad effective Aqua Tail. This leaves Koga with a Lushru, making it free for us to pick up the 5th gym badge. With the plans I have for our starter, we won't be able to evolve it for a while, so I go ahead and box it and pick up Magnadile, which for the time being, we're only able to evolve into this monstrosity. Then, since I have to go through the Safari Zone anyway, I pick up the first encounter I find, an Agdon. Once I've then picked up the HM for Surf, it's time to take on Silphco, but before we take on Giovanni, we have to take on a rival. In the Kanto games, Blue tends to be one of the more difficult challenges, and in this randomizer, that certainly ended up being the case. Starting with Nidotop, he deals massive damage with a Thrash to Gardevoir before I take it out with a quad-effective Psychic. His second Pokemon, however, Heracross fused with itself, is a Pokemon my team is much less well-equipped to handle. Milner swaps into a Megahorn, leaving her at just 5 HP, and I really don't have anything I can swap into. And sadly, this means that Milner is never gonna get to become a Milknight. The only mon I have the Heracross isn't super effective against is Charganium, which even still almost gets one-shot by a close combat and can't take it out with a quad-effective Air Slash. That spells the end for Mediumfoot, at least he got to get to his final form. My final hope is Robogator, who does have Sturdy, so even if we got hit by a close combat here, we could have survived and taken out the Heracross with this Surf. Next, Smelly's got a Snoros, so I swap out of Robogator into Rocario, which ends up being a solid matchup, allowing me to take out the Snoros with a few Aura Spheres. Next, he sends in his starter, which has now evolved into its final form, Rhytar. Now, while this thing is an electric type, I don't have any other option but to swap into my Gyaraking and hope it doesn't go for an electric type move. Luckily, it just goes for Dark Pulse, allowing me to take it out the next turn with a Hammer Arm. Finally, Blue's got a Drainair, which we can easily handle with a Play Rough, but he did manage to drain us of a third of our team. So, after picking up Chartile and Agdon from the box, we do what we came here to do and take on Giovanni. This one, unlike the first one before Erica, which was an absolute breeze, is a multi-battle we have to fight together with Blue. Multi-battles are incredibly unpredictable, and especially so in a randomizer when you have no idea what you're going up against. At least Chartile can immediately get rid of the Parasaur with a quad-effective Flamethrower. Nidotop hits a very soft Gyro Ball as the Golzing goes for a Haze. In comes Landler, so I go for a Leaf Storm, which just barely misses out on the KO as it sets up an Aqua Ring. Nidotop fails to land an Earth Power as Golzing proceeds to explode. And because I narrowly survive it in the red, it really just accomplishes taking out 2 of his own Pokemon. With only Gardevoir left, I swap out into Rocario and go for a Thunderbolt, which does over half, but it activates the Gardevoir's red card, swapping me out for Robogator. From there, Nidotop sets up an Agility and fails to take out the Gardevoir with a Thrash. It then heals up with Roost, shedding its flying typing, so a Thunderbolt isn't enough to take it out. After Giovanni heals, we hit the Gardevoir with a Thrash Thunderbolt combo, which just barely misses out on the KO, so finally, Nidotop gets to do something useful and take it out with a Thrash. With Saffron City no longer terrorized by Team Rocket, we can pick up a Shiny Stone from this lady and take the rail to Goldenrod City to shop for a Dusk Stone, leaving us with one final task in Saffron City to take on the gym leader Sabrina. She's got a normal type team, which isn't something I'm crazy scared of. Starting with a Milkle, she actually outspeeds Skeledon and uses Shell Smash, which lowers her defenses, allowing me to hit for massive damage with an Iron Head. To not lose her Milkle, she swaps into Kangaskhan because who would want to lose their Milkle? I'm then expecting a Fire-type move, so I swap into Gyaraking, who gets off an Intimidate and tanks a Dizzy Punch. From there, a single Aqua Tail is enough to take out the Kangaskhan. Conveniently, her next Pokemon is a Talosian, another normal Fire-type hybrid, allowing us to easily take it out with another Aqua Tail. Once again, she sends in Milkle, which she immediately heals with a Max Potion to preserve it because who wouldn't want to? Her efforts are wasted, however, since I can just take it out in a couple of Aqua Tails. Finally, she's got a Wobbering, and since Gyaraking was getting a bit low on health, I swap into Skeledon, who can easily handle this thing in just a few turns. With Cinnabar being our next destination, I first pick up a Magnet Stone to evolve Robogator into its final form. Moving through Route 21, I pick up my next encounter, a Christmas Sceptile. This Pokemon carefully grows trees and plants. Is there really a way to carefully grow a tree out your ass? Once we actually reach Cinnabar, it's time to take on the 7th gym leader, Blaine, who has completely forgone his fire types in favor of grass types. Luckily, our team is full of answers to grass types, and I almost take out his Rosesaur immediately with a flamethrower. He then tries healing his Rosesaur, which isn't gonna work since we're faster, so he opts for swapping out into Weepin' Gigas. And I'd be a lot more afraid of this thing if it didn't have slow start and if we didn't get a free hit off of that switch. Next in is Rona, so I go for an Air Slash, which doesn't do as much as I was hoping, as I then get locked in with Fire Spin. Things were looking very bad for Chartile until I randomly get a critical hit, both taking out the Rona and freeing me from Fire Spin. Thinking it's quad weak to flying, I stay in against Execucross, but it ends up surviving and taking Chartile out. Once more in this run, I'm being endangered by Heracross, and once more Robogator's gonna have to get me out of it. This time by surviving the close combat on 1 HP with Sturdy and finishing off the Execucross with an Ice Beam. Finally, Blaine is only left with Rosesaur, but I can't stay in with Robogator, so I swap out into Rocario. A Double Edge barely does anything on the switch, and I can take out the Rosesaur with an Ominous Wind the next turn, claiming the 7th Gym Badge. Which means we need to prepare for our next encounter with Team Rocket. Going up against the 3 birds fused together, we're gonna need a solid team. Starting out by fully evolving my Litley into Chandigar. I then head to the Viridian River where I find this Squirtle, which, because it's a randomizer, of course isn't a Squirtle and ends up being a Pikatar. With preparations made, we're ready to set sail towards Mount Ember. Going up against all 3 legendary birds at once, we're definitely gonna need a solid strategy, and I think I found one. If you go into this boss fight unprepared, you will undoubtedly be wiped clean and have to start over your run. But I came determined and prepared to do just a little bit better. It will unfortunately come at the cost of a really cool Pokemon, since my plan is to use King Boo to go for a Destiny Bond, since it's pretty much guaranteed to get eliminated right away after that. It ends up being Articuno getting a critical hit, meaning that's the one we knock out. From there, Gardevoir has a lot of special defense, so we can swap it in and go for a Stab Thunderbolt to take Zapmalcuno M below half health. Then since they just go for Air Slash and Charge, I can take it out the following turn, only leaving Zapdos. But Zapdos really isn't a problem, especially when you have an answer as good as Skeledon, who isn't a ground type, but we've got Lightning Rod, completely immune to electric type moves. So yeah, Zapdos can hit me with as many quad-resisted ancient powers as it wants, giving me the chance to take it out with a couple of Stone Edges. And yeah, we lost a Pokemon to achieve victory, but at least we lost it on our own terms. Winning also means that we get to challenge Moltres, and since we haven't picked up a random encounter in Mount Ember yet, I decided to give it a shot, and it ends up being randomized into a fusion between Empoleon and Garchomp. Now that is awesome. With only 1 gym badge left to collect, we have to take on Giovanni once again, this time as a Dragon Master. I lead with Robogator, who can resist dragons with its steel typing and fire off ice beams, which isn't that useful against Kabudra, so I swap out into Gyaraking. And something very strange happens since Kabudra's been randomized into holding a black sludge, thus triggering Giovanni to heal up the next turn. This is terrible news for Giovanni since it allows me to collect a free Dragon Dance and set up with a second the next turn as he misses a Metal Sound. From there, it's like I took out the Kabudra for free with a +2 Play Rough. Q-Jinx comes in next, and while it's cute, it stands no chance. Next he sends in Gaytile, which my Gyaraking is tremendously into. Just 2 kings living their best life. From there, Giovanni has 2 Pokemon left, the first being a Clefgon we can immediately take care of with a Play Rough. Finally, he's got a Talonite, which is a way bigger problem since we don't have a super effective move, so I swap out into Skeledon. I end up getting flinched by a second Dragon Rush, so I decide to go for Earthquake, but Talonite uses me first, getting to strike me with Earthquake first, which is quad effective. Not a way you usually lose a Pokemon in these runs, but now that we know it has me first, we can try and work around it, going for Ice Beam, which even with an Ice Gem doesn't do that much damage since Talonite is a Fire Dragon type. I do eventually manage to get it down into the red, which activates its Starfberry, boosting its special defense, which is gonna make it even harder to take it out after Giovanni goes for a full restore. To make things easier for myself, I start going for Flash Cannons, hoping for that special defense drop, and eventually I end up getting it. That's about when Talonflame shows me it has Acrobatics, which is powered up since it's now lost its item. So once it gets me down low enough the next turn with a Dragon Rush, I definitely have to swap out. And since I've got another Steel type on the team, I go ahead and swap out into the Emperor, who actually tanks a Dragon Rush quite well despite it being a critical hit, and can take out the Talonite the next turn with a Dragon Claw. And thus, we've collected collected all 8 gym badges. And since Giovanni's just opened up a slot on our team, I think it's time to bring back our starter, which we're going to use the shiny stone we got in Saffron City on to evolve it into Guardian. And once we've evolved it, we can reverse the fusion to get this beauty. I'm talking about the awesome sprite work, don't get excited. Then once we've made our way towards the Indigo Plateau, we really should explore our options of encounters. So I begin by rappelling my way through the power plant to take on Zapdos, which is randomized into Honchram. I then do the same in Seafoam Islands to take on Articuno to have the best chance at a high base stat total, where we get a Besius, which has a lot worse stats than you might expect for an Arceus fusion, which is the only reason I'm allowing it since mythicals are usually banned otherwise in Nuzlockes, but in this case the stats don't reflect mythical status at all. Finally, I'd like to add that Pikatar to the team, so I get myself a Thunderstone and evolve it into Rhytar, meaning the final team I'm bringing to the Elite Four consists of Robogator with Thunderbolt, Surf, Ice Beam, and Flash Cannon, Thorzilla with Wild Charge, Crunch, Earthquake, and Rock Slide, Husbando with Ominous Wind, Thunderbolt, Aura Sphere, and Calm Mind, B-List Mythical with Extreme Speed, Fell Stinger, Poison Jab, and X-Scissor, Lazy Daddy with Play Rough, Hammer Arm, Dragon Dance, and Aqua Tail. And for the last time, she's not your girlfriend with Psychic, Calm Mind, Moonblast, and Thunderbolt. A team I'm hoping can take us all the way to the Hall of Fame. But first, we've got to take on Lorelei. She's been given a team full of ghost types, and last time we faced ghost types versus Lieutenant Surge, things didn't go so well. So I'm hoping our full team of 6 is better prepared this time, immediately swapping out of B-List into Thorzilla to tank a discharge. It is kind of funny that because of Thorzilla's dark and electric typing, it gets hit by its own Sandstorm. However, we got enough special defense to tank discharges as it is, and we can take out the Bandos with a ground gem boosted Earthquake. Genqueen is next, and with less than half of its health remaining, I'm forced to swap out, going into my Gyaraking. On the switch, I'm hit by an Earth Power, doing about 33%, after which I take out the Genqueen with an Aqua Tail the next turn. Third is Houndregus, which definitely looks like a fire type, but Aqua Tail isn't super effective, so I don't deal that much damage, and I'm forced to swap out the next turn. And it turns out that Ghost and Dark only has one weakness in the Fairy type. Lorelei ends up healing both on the turn I switch in and the turn after, only after Sandstorm damage, letting me hit it with a free Moonblast. Since I'm faster, I can then just use another Moonblast the next turn, taking the Houndregus out. Fourth is a Giraloon, and while part of it's legendary, the other part is a Drifloon, so I'm not particularly worried about it. I can't two-shot it with a Thunderbolt from Guardian, so I go ahead and swap out into Rocario. And I'm very glad I did, since the Giraloon decides to blow up, taking half of Rocario's health with it, leaving Lorelei with her final Pokemon, Dusktwo. Expecting a Ghost move, I swap into B-List, who can dodge it with its normal type. I then go for a Bug Gem boosted X-Scissor, which does a lot of damage, but not as much as I was hoping. Dusktwo then heals with a Figgy Berry and locks me in with Mean Look. Once I get it into the red with the next X-Scissor though, it starts an annoying cycle of me not being able to take it out, and it just barely healing up a bit more with Recover every single turn. To get out of this loop, I start going for Poison Jab, and on the first one, I end up landing the Poison as the Dusktwo goes for Guard Swap, which means that after Sandstorm and Poison damage, an X-Scissor is enough to take it out, beating the first Elite Four member. Second is Bruno, who by the RNG gods has been given a team of Rock types. His original team has 40% Rock types, so it's really not that off-brand. And starting off with a Steel Rock Sygron, I can easily take it out with a single quad-effective Hammer Arm, which unfortunately allows Eswudo to outspeed me the next turn, taking about 40% of my health away from me before I can take it out with an Aqua Tail. And even with the speed drop, we're still faster than Flahorn, which we also take out with an Aqua Tail. Armorous comes out next, but being an Ice and Rock type, it goes down to another single Hammer Arm. Finally, Bruno has an Omastar, and because I've dropped my speed so much, I decide to swap out into Robogator, which I get to swap in for free against a Protect. It tries to fight back with an Ancient Power, but unlike Lieutenant Surge, can't get the Omni Boost. In a desperate attempt to hang on to this thing, Bruno throws every full restore he has at it, but it won't stop my onslaught of Thunderbolts from defeating him. Third is Agatha, who isn't too far off her original typing either, now having Dark types. I start out with Guardian without even knowing what type she had going into the fight, however it works out perfectly since I can quad resist a close combat, and then especially after the special defense Defense Drop can take it out in a single quad-effective Moonblast. Second out is Venusaur, and fearing a super effective Poison-type move, I swap out into Rocario to be immune to the poison. I gauge damage with an Aura Sphere, but it's really not doing that much since it's only neutral because of Venusaur's Poison type. On top of that, a Razor Wind does a lot more damage than I expected it to, so I go ahead and set up a Calm Mind to hopefully boost my damage. Agatha for some reason didn't go for a full restore last turn, but now decides to go for it, and apparently an Aura Sphere isn't quite enough to do over half, so I set up another Calm Mind to have enough power to take it out the following turn. Third out is Slow Dial, but being a water type, a +2 Thunderbolt should do the trick. As for Weirdos, a +2 quad effective Aura Sphere is a guaranteed one-hit KO. Finally, Agatha is left with her last Pokemon Zoshan, so I decide to swap out, sending in Thorazilla, who just gets hit by a soft punishment on the switch. Agatha then oddly goes for a full restore just to heal off some Sandstorm damage, allowing me to fire off a Ground Gem boosted Earthquake to take out most of Zoshan's health, meaning another Earthquake grants us the victory versus the third Elite Four member. Ah, I heard about you, Antler Boy. Subscriber? Based? You can call me Lance, the fighting trainer. Wait a minute, Mythical Fightings? My team is not very well equipped to handle fighting types, so we'll see how this goes. Since Lance normally has dragon types, I decided to lead with Robogator, which of course is a terrible choice in this matchup. Swapping out, I have two decent options, either Rocario or Guardian. And in this case, Guardian is the perfect choice since we can trace Intimidate to lower Archamp's attack. Lance instead goes for a strategy I'm not too sure of, first going for a Scary Face to lower my speed, and then using Haze to eliminate the stat drops. Let's just say it doesn't work out too well for Archamp. Lance's second Pokemon is Ho-Chan. I can't even say it. Not wanting to be hit by some powerful Fire-type move, I decide to swap out into Gyaraking. Oh no. I would have never expected it to go for a Focus Punch against Guardian, but it didn't even help that we had Intimidate. We just lost our strongest Pokemon for no good reason at all. With a severe lack of good options, I opt to send in Thorazilla, and luckily Lance decides to tighten his focus once again, allowing us to fire off a Ground Gem powered Earthquake, which isn't quite enough to take it out. This prompts Lance to go for a full restore, but it gives us a chance to use another Earthquake, which isn't quite enough to take it below half, but with the Sandstorm it is. And because Lance insists on using Focus Punch, we can finally take this dumb bird out. Next is Hitmonreon, and I don't even have a switch here, so I just have to stay in and let Thorazilla go down. This gives us a safe switch into Guardian, which is really important since we're not faster than Hitmonreon that hits us with a very powerful Blaze Kick before we can take it out with a Psychic. Second to last out is Zekroth, and we are not faster, but it somehow goes for a Zen Headbutt, leaving us on 11 HP. And while we can clap back and take it out with a quad effective Moonblast, 11 HP puts us in range of being taken out by our own Sandstorm. We only have one Pokemon left to deal with though, and it's Chanlade. This is awful since we only have special attacks on Rocario, and Chansey is so specially defensive. All we can do is watch Rocario fall to a super effective close combat. I send in B-List, and while it isn't quite enough to take it out with an extreme speed, our bug typing at least makes close combat neutral, allowing B-List to fire off another extreme speed, finally defeating Lance. This leaves us with only one more fight to beat the game, but with only a third of our team still standing. The odds are stacked against us, and some would say only a fool would challenge the champion with only 2 Pokemon. But what choice do I have? With only 2 Pokemon remaining, we're gonna need a lot of things to go right for us to stand any chance at all. The chances of victory aren't good, but it's also not impossible. Our first matchup versus Polyzam is actually quite good, since we can deal super effective damage with X-Scissor. The Hyper Voice I take in return does about 30%. He then decides to withdraw, and you'll see that my plan was to try and take it out with Fell Stinger. Our matchup versus Azumaflame is terrible, so I swap into Robogator, who dodges a me first. Smelly then heals my Fell Stinger damage, allowing me to fire off a free Thunderbolt, almost taking Azumaflame out. This puts us in a perfect position to start burning all of his full restores by taking it down into the red again and again. In another insane stroke of luck, we get Azumaflame paralyzed the turn he runs out of full restores, allowing us to take it out first with a Thunderbolt. In comes Rhytar, and somehow Robogator is still at full health, allowing us to survive an Earthquake no matter what because of Sturdy and fire off a Surf. The Rhytar sees a KO with any move and misses a Stone Edge, which is huge, allowing us to take it down further with another Surf. And even though we lose Robogator, that's actually better than if we were able to take it out, because now now that Rhytar is at such low health, we're guaranteed to take it out with a super effective Fellstinger, boosting our attack by 3 stages. We are not out of this yet. His third Pokemon is a Steetails, which is a bit of a problem since we don't have any moves to hit it for anything but not very effective damage. A critical hit Extreme Speed gets it below half, and it misses a Stone Edge. The next Extreme Speed even gets a crit, but just misses out on the KO. This time, Steetail connects with the Stone Edge, but we survive on 12 HP. And even the Sandstorm with only 1 HP remaining, even though we can take out the Steetails and half of Smelly's team. In the end, we have no way to avoid Rhytar's Sandstorm, falling short of victory. My name is Antlerboy Bisuniv Alive, trainer to a murdered B-List, trainer to a murdered Robogator, and I will have my vengeance in this run or the next.